Sislinverse, and I'm back today with another video. Today is going to be a haul. These are just like a mix of books I got at like various points during the second half of 2021, and it's going to be a mix of ebooks and physical books. So I'm just going to kind of group them by like when I bought them for the most part. There isn't really a big rhyme or reason to this haul. So first off, I got a bunch of ebooks through this Afrofuturism and the Black Fantastic story bundle. I'd already read like a handful of them and got copies of some of them, but the price point was such that it was still like a really good deal. First book was Talk Like a Man by Nisi Shaw. This is a short story collection. I read Filter House by Nisi Shaw. I loved it. I think their short story writing is like stellar. So I'm excited to see what they do in this volume. They write a lot about divinity. They practice Ifa, and I think that influence becomes clear when you read some of their writing. There's also Brothers Jetstream Leviathan by Zigzag Claiborne, as well as its sequel, Afropuffs Are the Antenna of the Universe. I'd seen this one around for a little bit, and I just hadn't gotten around to reading it. I don't think my library has it, so I think I was going to have to go through Scribd to get it. I'd read, I think, like one short story by this author before, but I think in general he's known for like his punchy, like humorous writing. Then there's Slay, edited by Nicole Givens Kurtz. This is one that I'd gotten an arc of and I really enjoyed it, but it was like a temporary arc, like I don't still have the file, so I was happy to snag a copy of this. I want to do a review of this at some point because I think it is like a really solid vampire anthology. Like, we just get it from so many different angles. Like, we have vampire hunters, we have ethical vampires, we have vampires in the future, we have like sadistic, sensual vampires, which are my personal favorite, and we have monstrous vampires. There are like funny vampire stories. It's just like a whole range. So I think that this is like a great read for anyone who's a big fan of vampire fiction. Then there was the Dominion anthology of African speculative fiction, edited by Zelda Knight and Okenechowe Donald Ekpeki. I think that the order of Ekpeki's names is different on this cover. He has an essay, I think, actually, about the power of names and African names in particular and honoring them. I'll link that in the description box below for people who are interested in reading that. But since he edited that anthology, he's like changed the pen name that he writes under, and so I'm just going to refer to him by his most recent pen name. And then there is How to Recognize a Demon Has Become Your Friend by Linda Addison. I'd read Consumed, Reduced to Beautiful Gray Ashes by her, which is like, I think, maybe her flagship poetry collection. She writes horror poetry, and that's the one that won a Stoker and was kind of like a big moment in Stoker history because it was the first time that an African American had won that award. It's a big name award for horror that's written in English, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'm someone who's drawn to like wrathful, like angry, kind of vengeful characters. And I think that collection really spoke to that. And so I'm excited to read more from her. She also has a grim sense of humor. Then there's New World, Old Ways, edited by Karen Lord. This is an anthology of Caribbean speculative fiction. I first heard about this through In Jerry of Onyx pages. My library might have had a copy of this one. I'm actually not sure. But Karen Lord is a fantastic novelist. I loved Redemption in Indigo, which is a great fantasy story that she's written. I enjoyed Best of All Possible Worlds, which is her sci-fi, like alien space odyssey story. And I was interested to read something that she had edited. I don't think I'd read a collection that she'd like worked on before. And I don't know really any of the names of this anthology, and that's always exciting. There's Bad Mothers by Bill Campbell. This is like a funkadelic space opera comic about this, like, I think they're a cover band, but they're also like bounty hunters, if I remember correctly. They do some sort of fighting thing, and they just like travel through space in this like spaceship that they have. And I think that this bundle just has either it's the first issue or the first volume. Then there's also Renew You by Michelle Tracy Berger. This is a sci-fi novella about this relaxer that is giving people like lesions and like I think somehow triggers an apocalypse. She'd written a doll story that I had adored in Five Literary Magazine. It was like a novelette about this doll that comes alive, and it had been nominated for or won a Carl Brandon Award. And I was like very happy to hear that because I thought it was phenomenal. I want to talk about it at a later date. And so I'm interested to read something more long form from her. And I think that this is interesting. I think this could go a lot of ways. Because I think, on the one hand, there is a history of discrimination in hair products, like hair products being marketed to Black women that have like harmful ingredients, or it was like later recalled. And also, there's like a history of Black women relaxing their hair being pathologized, like taking it out of context or like being like unfairly criticized. There's discrimination against people with coily or kinky hair, so there is like a pressure for people to straighten their hair to like fit into white supremacist standards of beauty or professionalism. And like sometimes people have internalized that, and also sometimes people just want to straighten their hair and have fun, and it's not that serious. It kind of becomes a thing where it's like people's personal choices are like put under a microscope and like super analyzed, as opposed to looking at like the big picture, like structural issues. Like, I mean, I thought they had to pass a law recently in California protecting Black women's right to wear their natural hair, like at work. Editing Chloe here. So the law I was referring to is called the Crown Act, and it is like a general law prohibiting race-based discrimination against hair, focusing, I think, on schools and the workplace. The reason why I focused on Black women was just because that's like mostly who I've seen like in like the messaging around it and like the campaigning for it, like in the promotional materials, but it is like not a gender specific thing. So I'm interested to see how this novella deals with a very complicated topic. And the next one is Queen of Zazal by J.S. Amakpour. This is a historical fantasy about a real life Hausa queen, Amina, or Princess Amina, in the Zazal Emirates, which is in present day Nigeria. This one is lucky, is fortuitous. I'd asked on my community tab who are some authors that people would be interested in me interviewing. And I had already bought the bundle, and someone mentioned that they'd be interested in hearing from an interview from this author. So that might happen depending on when I read it and how I feel about the book. And then the last item in the bundle was Frequencies, a fiction album by Tania D. Johnson. I don't know much about this. It has a track listing and there's music and stuff, so I don't really know what it's about. I don't know what's going on with it, but it'll be interesting to give that a listen. So those were the Afrofuturism and Black Fantastic Story Bundle. In terms of other ebooks I bought a copy of Fur and Gold by Craig Lawrence Gidney. I have an interview with him from last year, which I'll link in the description box below for people who are interested to give that a watch. He is a fantastic short story writer, and I think he's like really good at writing folktale retellings, and this is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast retellings are like my thing. Like, I haven't read a whole lot of them, but I love the source material, and I don't know if I'll get sick of those stories. I just feel like there's so many places to go with it, and I feel like the retellings that I have generally seen have just kind of like scratched the surface. So I don't know much about what it's about, but I trust that I am in very competent hands. I think the thing that's like really important to nailing folktale retellings is like the narrative voice, and I think Gidney is like really good at that. The punchy writing, the like jokey or fourth wall breaking aspect to it, I think he's very skilled at writing these types of stories, so I'm excited to see what he does with this one. He always does something unexpected. Then there is Drag Me Up by R.M. Virtues. This is like a contemporary fantasy romance between Hades and Persephone. It just like took over my timeline for a little bit. I think specifically Books With Me was really hyping this up on Twitter, and it looked like fun. I'm trying to read more fantasy romance, and so I decided to give it a read. I've enjoyed the snippets that Virtues has posted of his other work on Twitter, and so I'm excited for this one. Next up is The Vow by D. Rose. This is a contemporary romance. I don't know much about it. It looks like there's something in there involving marriage. I don't know. The author was advertising that it was free for the day, and so I snagged it really quick because I heard this is a Black love story. Next one is Things Hoped For by Chensia C. Higgins. This was one that I bought because I was looking for Black sapphic romances, and I heard about this one, and I was like, I haven't read this author before. I think she has a good reputation on romance Twitter. One of the love interests raps, and I was like, oh, is this going to be like my sapphic version of Let Me Love You? Let Me Love You by Alexandria House is about this romance between this single mother, whose name completely escapes me, and this rapper, Big South. He's like an iconic artist, and they kind of run in sort of similar circles, so they run into each other, and I really loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I finished it. I was like, wow, I feel like the only way I could like this story even more was if it was sapphic. Like, okay, the rapper in this one's from the South. What if the rapper's from like the Northeast, you know, like maybe like New York, Brooklyn, perhaps? Um,
Oh,
wouldn't that be something? And I think this is still set in the South, but I'm excited to see what happens. Next up is Meeting Destiny by Tamara Allen. I heard about this through a Twitter account, Girl Have You Read, which promotes Black romance stories. And this is a college romance from what I remember. And one of the characters is a basketball player. And like, I don't like sports books, but if it's like a Black Sapphic sports romance, I would be all over that. So I had like a very short romance TBR of Black Sapphic romances I wanted to read. And I got through that in November and I was like, oh no, I need more. Like, I don't really even know like authors whose backlists to check. Like, what are things that if I search them, like I'm more likely to find like Black romance like in a list? And I was like, I mean, maybe basketball. I feel like that's just like a cultural thing. I should be able to find a decent number of like Black Sapphic romances if I look for like lesbian romance like basketball lists. And like, not really. I didn't have any luck. I'm so disappointed. And then Girl Have You Read post about this, and I was like, ah, perfect. Let me give this a read. Also, I want to read like a Black Sapphic like track romance at some point. Like the meet cute is like one of them's a sprinter and she holds her blocks or something at a meet. I feel like the material's there and someone just needs to do something with it. And then last up is Mistletoe by Kimberly Lemming. This is like a secondary world fantasy romance, so that is promising because I'd been looking for more of those. I'd heard good things about the other book that Lemming had written. I hear she has like a fun sense of humor, and I'm just think it's going to be a cute read. So those are all the ebooks, and now we can get into the physical books. We've got Dr. Marvelous Jin's Odd Scholars by B. Charisse Moore. I'm familiar with B. Charisse Moore from her poetry, and I believe she had worked as a poetry editor for File Literary Magazine. They do great work. I really recommend subscribing or buying some merch from them. And she wrote this like young adult historical fantasy about these teenagers who go to this like magical amusement park. The owner, Dr. Marvelous Jin, is doing a like scholarship giveaway for like her successor for African American teens. Moore pitched it as like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And I was just like really intrigued. Here you can see this like mermaid in a bottle, and I really want to know what's up with that because it's reminding me of a story about mermaid storms. Then there is Master of Poisons by Andrea Hairston. I had read this one already. I read an arc, I have a review up, but I wanted to take time to like read it when I wasn't in a crunch because Hairston writes like slower, more like lusciously written stories. So I also wanted to hybrid read this. My library has an audiobook, so I wanted to have the audiobook playing while I gave this a read so I kind of get more of like the full experience and get more immersed in the writing itself. I'm hoping to buddy read this with Kiki of If This Is Paradise. And this was a steal. This was a used book. And I might be of the unpopular opinion that I prefer library copies. Obviously, if the interior is all beat up, like, I don't want it, like, regardless. But really, for me, the, like, kiss of death for a used copy is when someone has written on the inside or highlighted on the inside. Like, it's fine on, like, the, what do you call them? Like, these, like, blank pages at the front. But if it's on, like, the text on the inside, I get so upset. But I love the lamination and stuff. And so I got this, like, nice, near new laminated hard copy for really cheap because it's a library copy, and sellers automatically like dock a lot of points for that, I guess, because there's usually like a card flap, there's usually like the sticker from the library on the back, and I don't care about any of those things, so I made out like a bandit with this purchase. Very happy about it. Also, the cover is just gorgeous, and the map in the beginning, I love a nice stylized map. Look at that. It's so beautiful. Next up is a gift from a book club friend, Sarah. Thank you to Sarah for this book. It's Dreams and Assorted Nightmares by Abu Bakr Adam Ibrahim. This is a short story collection about this mystical town of Zango. All the stories are set in this town, and it's just attracts like paranormal encounters and occurrences. And it's about like different things that are going on in this town. Author is based in Nigeria, and I've been trying to read more fiction written by authors not in the US, so this is going to be a good read for me. Next up is Flowers for the Sea by Zin E. Rockland. I have had my eye on this for so long. The only thing I knew about it was that it was comped to writing from Rivers Solomon and Kai Ashanti Wilson, and those are two authors who I hold in incredibly high regard. Kai Ashanti Wilson can craft the most beautiful sentences. They are like beautiful, like silvery chains. Like, I don't know how else to describe them. Like, it's so intricate and interconnected, and it just sounds so pretty. And River Solomon just writes like visceral, thought-provoking, great stuff. So that was like literally all I heard about when the book was first announced. No cover even out yet, and I was like, I need to get my hands on this book. So I pre-ordered it. Very excited to give it a read. It's a fantasy horror about this group of people who are living on an ark and a young mother who's refusing the sexual advances of a prince. And good things are not coming for her. I see tentacles in the background. It's going to be tense. It's going to be a tense read. Next up is A Jigsaw of Fire and Stars by Yaba Baidu. This is by a British author, and I'm trying to read more books by Black British authors because I realized I just had like a lot of books on my TBR. I hadn't picked any of them up. This is like a young adult. I heard it's kind of light on the fantasy side. It's about this like young girl who's washed ashore in this like chest full of treasure, and she's like a member of this like weird traveling circus, but something from like the treasures that she was found with are like calling to her and like making demands of her, and she has to figure out what's going on with that. I really like the cover. I like the contrast between like the fire and the water and just like the thick swirls of paint to make those waves and like the people you see in them. Editing Chloe here. Just a quick shout out to the artist for this cover, who is Leo Nichols. So I'm excited for this. I haven't read anything from this author. Next up is Midnight in Indigo, edited by Iana A. Small. This is a short story collection. Midnight in Indigo publishes writing from Black female authors, and they did a speculative issue and compiled it into this bind-up. I bought this from Sister Sci-Fi, who's a great retailer devoted to science fiction fantasy by Black authors. I had a gift card from Black SF Evathon. The co-host very graciously gifted it to me. Thank you to Arlene and Jerry, Lucy, and Noria. And I need to read this soon, so I know and Jerry has read it, and Emma Ray of Emma Ray Empowered has read it, and I want to touch base with them about what they think of it. Then there is My Fishy Stepmom by Shakira Bourne. You might know about the US release. I thought it was Me Against the Sea. It's about this young girl. Her father is recently, I believe, widowed, and he's like looking for love again, basically. And he brings home this woman who she suspects to be some sort of vengeful mermaid woman, possibly a Mami Wata. And she's trying to warn her father and keep everybody safe, but also it's like, is this woman really the issue, or is it kind of like her not being able to come to grips with her father moving on? I opted to buy this from Rebel Women Lit based on a review from Kiki of If This Is Paradise. She said that both versions were good, but she said there's just more cultural references in this story that she related to, and this was the version that had been printed first through Blouse and Skirt Books, which is an imprint from Blue Banyan Books, and I wanted to give this a read first because I'm sure my library will have the US release. Kiki just spoke very highly of it, and I kind of wanted to get the feel for like the original, you know? And I've been loving middle grade recently. I have like very high expectations for this. I'm sure it's going to blow me away. Next up is The Pride of Nule by Shanice Ndlovu. This is a short story collection from a Zimbabwean writer. I heard about this from Charity of Booked on Charity, who's a great booktuber. You should check her out. She's based in South Africa, and I have been trying to read more authors not based in the United States, and so this seemed like a great way to do that. This is an African fantasy short story collection. I have not read anything from this author before. This is going to be an exciting experience. So The Pride of Nule and then these next two books were Christmas presents. I usually ask for academic books for Christmas just because of the sticker price is kind of high. So one of them is The Things That Fly in the Night, Female Vampires in Literature of the Circum-Caribbean and African Diaspora by Giselle Lisa Anatol. I had been recommended this on Twitter by the Journal of Vampire Studies, and so it sounded really fascinating. I really wanted to give it a read, and I hadn't read much literature from the Caribbean, and so I think this might also give me good recommendations as well. And then the other one is Recovering Black Storytelling and Qualitative Research and Darken's Story Work, Futures of Data Analysis and Qualitative Research by S.R. Tolliver. She has a website, like a database of fiction featuring Black female characters, specifically fantasy and science fiction, both movies and books. And so that's how I had heard of the author. I'm very interested in this because it's looking at like storytelling, like as a meta framework, I think, and like the imagination, which is something that I'm increasingly interested in. And I'm mostly interested in the delivery because rather than writing this as like more like the dry academic writing that's pretty common, because this is like a research book, she wrote this as sort of like a pseudo science fiction story. And so I'm interested to see how she brings those things together, because I think there is like a barrier to people who are interested in things coming out of academia. Editing Chloe here. I'm basically hoping that this reading experience will be like reading Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder. That book uses this like fictional story to teach philosophical concepts like about the history of people like Aristotle and other philosophers. And like I'm not someone who would ever really pick up like a philosophy textbook or a philosophy book and read any of those things. But because of the narrative, I ended up learning a lot about a subject I wouldn't normally care to read about, and like remembering things that would have been very difficult for me to retain otherwise. So I'm hoping that Tolliver's research book will have a similar effect on me. Next up is The Undertakers by Nicole Glover. I won this in a giveaway. Thank you to Nicole Glover. She was very generously selected me as one of the winners. She was only going to do one initially, and then she brought it to 4. I read the first book on this series. It's a historical fantasy murder mystery series. I loved it. I've mentioned the characters in the books in a couple other places since then, and so I'm very excited to read the sequel. It's set in Reconstruction era Philadelphia. This one is about discrimination and fire companies, and I'm excited to see what Hetty and Benji are up to in this magical novel. Oh, and also she gave me a bookmark and character art of the series, and that was so pretty, and I really appreciate it. Next up is The Infinite by Patience Agbagbi. This is a middle grade science fiction about children who are born on February 29th called leaplings, and they have the ability to leap through time. And I am just very intrigued by this story. Like I said, I've been loving middle grade. This author is British, and I've been trying to read more Black British authors. And my library didn't get it. I was waiting for like a year. My library still hadn't gotten it after the release. And so I was like, I just need to get it. I really want to read it. I really want to see what's happening in this story. So the next one I have is a pre-order, and this is How to Stay Alive by Shingai and Jerry Kagunda. Got this through Neon Hemlock Press. They are a press devoted to publishing queer speculative fiction. They do a lot of novellas. They also sponsor the Baffling magazine, which does queer flash fiction. Their releases stay on my radar, basically. I just love this cover. I love the artwork. Oh, sorry, the illustration is by Ijiwe Ebene Ebe, and the design was by Dave Ring, who's the owner of the publishing house. I just love, you can see the texture on the coils in her hair. Like these like the leaves with like the streams of rainbow like pooling and like flowing over this woman's body. I love the details on her face. Like I especially love her lips and her cupid's bow and her cheekbones. I just think this cover is gorgeous. This is about I'll just read from the back since it's right in front of me. Nyokabe's world unravels after her brother Baraka's death by suicide. When an eccentric auntie gives Nyokabe a potion that sends her back in time to when Baraka was still alive, it becomes her only goal to keep him that way. But Kabi soon learns that while storytellers might be the carriers of time, defying the past comes with its own repercussions. So I believe this is based off of a short story that this author had previously written, and I'm excited to give it a read. Next up is The Dark Fantastic by Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. This is one I've read already. It is a nonfiction. It looks at, I think, 3 or 4 major pop culture franchises in like the past decade. I think it was Harry Potter, Vampire Diaries, Merlin, and I thought there was one more, The Hunger Games. and it looks at the role that Black characters play in those stories and what that says about the United States' history with race and racism, specifically as it pertains to the imagination and Black people. I read this before. It's a really good read. I think some of the conclusions are things that people probably have come to on their own, or if you read like a lot of pop culture criticism, it's stuff that you've already heard. But Thomas develops a new framework called the Cycle of the Dark Fantastic, which she gets into in here, which is like a very unique way of understanding what's being described here. Like, also the organization on this is just like stellar. Like, it's very well thought out, it's very cohesive. Like, you really understand, I think, every part of the argument and how all the chapters like come together. Thomas also draws on her own history as a fan fiction writer and talks about what happens, once the text like leaves the screen projector, the book. Like, what is it that fans do with it? How do people actually engage with it? That's very interesting. I ordered a copy because one of the essays I was writing, I was trying to pitch to a paid publication and realized I was not qualified to talk about it at that time. Draws very heavily on this book, and I had it from the library. I thought I could just kind of game it by taking notes, and I realized that I would just like feel a lot better about it if I actually had this next to me to actually like cite it and like tab it and annotate it and whatever I had to do. So I got a physical copy. Even though I'm not really trying to pitch that essay anymore, this book really gave me a lot to think about, and I think is going to be very useful for me to have to reference going forward. And the cover art is by Paul Lewin, who is a Black fantasy like superstar. Like, he's done covers for the reprint of the Parable of the Sower series. He's done covers and artwork for a Subterranean Press version of N.K. Jemisin's How Long Till Black Future Month collection. Just wonderful, beautiful work. We're really excited to see all the places that his artwork has appeared. And last but not least is T.J. Young and the Therishis by Antoine Bandelet. This is the first installment in that series, The Gatekeeper's Staff. This is sort of like a young adult world within a world type story. Like, I've heard it comped to the Percy Jackson series. There's like this world basically where people have magical abilities, and the main character, TJ, is like really bad. He's either doesn't have them or they're like very underdeveloped, and so he's at this like camp to strengthen them. And his sister dies, and he also like finds out that the death wasn't an accident, and so he's like investigating it. And I'm excited. I've heard very good things. I really enjoyed his author interview on Written with Melanin. I'll link that in the description box below for people who want to check that out. Basically, the readers I trust who read this book really enjoyed it. And so when I got Sister Sci-Fi gift card from my Black SF co-host, thank you again, I used it to buy this book. So I have high expectations for it. I'm excited. Also, when I was asking people what authors they'd like to see me interview, Antoine Bandelet's name came up. And so I am going to try and make it a priority to read it this year to see if an interview could happen, possibly. So that was all the books that I bought. Have you read any of these titles? Are there any you think I should prioritize going forward? If you like the video, please hit a like button. If you want to, discuss anything I mentioned in the video, please comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already to stay up to date with me and my bookish activities. The Inheritance Trilogy read-along is going on. Thank you for watching, everybody. Take care and have a good one. Goodbye.